Thank you so much too for your fight on this, because these are people these were the frontline workers. This is what I mean. People were like on their balconies in New York, if they have balconies there, and they were all applauding frontline workers, and it was like this global thing. Now these people are being condemned and they're being called selfish if they don't get an injection, and a lot of them have natural immunity, and it doesn't matter because that doesn't count. Talk to us a little bit about how important this is.
No, so one, the case is important just because it's helping those frontline healthcare workers. That's a really big deal. But I'd love to talk about it just a little bit more broadly, because we're talking about a much broader swath of people that are affected by the mandate as a whole, other private businesses, you name it. And I would make two important points to you, I think, on this. Number one, let's go back to the fact that trillions of dollars were spent to make sure that people kept their jobs through the CARES Act and other things throughout this whole COVID pandemic, right? And so now the government's going to go back and say, hey, fire all of those people that everybody else's tax dollars went to make sure that they kept their jobs. That's just crazy enough to be thought up in Washington, D.C. To me, this is the more nefarious part of all of this. Whether you're talking about any variant of the virus, we know this is about power. And here's how I think it's really very deeply about the swamp and power. Think about this, whether it's members of the military or some kid at West Point or somebody in a private company or the State Department or some other government agency, right? They're essentially, the left is using coronavirus to wash them out of government. The left is using coronavirus to say, okay, they're self-identifying, saying, you know what, maybe I don't want to get this vaccine because it might cause infertility or it might cause something else, but they're self-identifying as conservative. And now the government's able to say, okay, you're not going to be the next person to commission in the U.S. Army. You're never going to become a lieutenant or a general or anything else. You're not going to advance the next generation of service members. And that goes to all of those different lanes. They're able to wash conservatives out of government. And I think they're licking their chops over it.
That's actually a really good point. And I think maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I would be so hesitant to even remotely look like I was, interested or agreeing with it. But after everything we've seen from even before 2016, up until now, the Wisconsin, I just talked about this last segment, Wisconsin John Doe raids, everything that we saw with the FBI following 2016. Oh, yeah, completely. And then the FBI Gretchen Whitmer thing. I completely do not put it past anybody who has an appetite for tyranny. I do not put it past them to engage in something like this as a way to further control. Now, to that point, tomorrow, apparently, as it's being reported, we're supposed to get more restrictions as it relates to the coronavirus and the pandemic, which we just learned this afternoon that apparently there's a positive case of Omicron or Omicron, depending on if you're listening to Fauci and Biden or scientists, that was identified in California. And apparently right now they're just saying that it's probably only going to extend to Americans that are traveling internationally and then coming back into the United States. But everything's still on the table, according to Jen Psaki. It might also be domestic flights as well. I wanted to ask if you knew anything about it, what your thoughts were, and what Congress or what Republicans can do to kind of push back on this, if indeed it is, we're looking at domestic travel restrictions.
Yeah, listen, so we know they're coming up with stupid policies, but they're not stupid about the way that they do these things. They do boil these frogs slowly. And so this is the same way it's gone through this whole thing, is to say, well, it's just for this. It's just for this period of time. And then that extends, right? Everybody's been talking about the 2 weeks to slow the curve 2 years ago. Well, we know where we're at today. It was just that. Now it's just this. Now it's just that. And it keeps going and going and going. There's no reason to think this will be any different. They'll find a way to expand it to, those that are in elementary school, and then they'll expand it to those that are in the healthcare workforce, and then they'll expand it to those that are in the military or somewhere else. They will find ways to keep looking for different lanes to do it. What do we do in the government? Something that I never imagined that we would have to do. I mean, to think in this land of liberty, freedom, and independence that we would have to write a law. I wrote a bill saying, hey, you know what? If you're an employer, you can't ask somebody about their vaccination status. That is a violation of their civil liberties on a whole host of different fronts. Is Pelosi going to move that whatsoever? and all of the other great ideas that some of my colleagues have about how to combat this, she's not going to move one of them. They're not interested in moving it in the slightest. They're interested in the opposite. They're interested in the tyranny of coronavirus and what they can use it for. So, the front of it is, we're going to do everything we can, but we know the numbers when we go to the floor of the House, and the fact that, Speaker Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, none of them are going to have anything to do with combating this whatsoever.